I don't know a single American that actually is not involved deeply in Washington, D.C., that doesn't want free and fair elections, that doesn't want every ballot to be counted, and wants to make sure that there is no monkey business going on, and that we can count on our elections. Every American, I don't care who you voted for, I think wants that. But I don't think anybody in Washington really wants that, especially the Democrats. They are already setting up that the election's going to be stolen and you can't trust it, and now the problems with the voting machines. They're doing the same thing they always do. But they're doing something else. Remember, the key to understanding this administration is the administration. He is a administrator. That's it. All of the agencies are being pushed to the limit to take away as many rights from you as possible and make the system work in a completely different way than constitutionally. Molly Hemingway has written a great article. It came out yesterday. Biden is hiding his plan to rig the 2022 midterm elections. Molly is joining us now. Hello, Molly.
Hello. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. So they're doing this in every agency, and this one you've tried to look into, and they're hiding everything that they're doing. Can you take us from the beginning and then show us what they're doing?
Sure. So in March of 2021, just a few weeks after President Biden took office, he issued an executive order saying that all 600 federal agencies had to come up with a plan to expand voting. Now, people were immediately alarmed because the Constitution does not give the executive branch authority over our election system. That's reserved for the states. There's a very tiny role for Congress. And so the executive branch has not been given that authority. And then people are also worried because expanding voting is an inherently political act. You know, it's mobilizing voters is a political act. And so the bureaucracy should not be involved with it. So people wanted to know, well, what are these plans going to be? Everyone had 200 days to turn in a plan to Susan Rice, by the way, you know, one of the most political people out there, for approval. And people started asking what the plans were, and they have been steadfastly refusing to return those plans ever since then.
Okay, so I want to make sure people understand. That is 600 federal agencies. 600 had 200 days to show how they were going to expand citizens' opportunities to register to vote and obtain information about, participate in the electoral process. They had until March 7th, 2021. You can't find anything about what any one of those 600 agencies turned in.
And congressmen have been asking for it. You've had the ranking member of every committee in the House asking for the information. You've had them expressing their concerns. Congressional committees, good government groups, outside citizens are doing FOIA requests, and they just can't get anything. And it seems to be that what they're doing is trying to slow walk it until well after the election. In one case, they said they would respond to the FOIA by May of 2024. And so it is really difficult to get information, which makes it difficult to even know what's going on. And I just want to be clear, these are inherently political acts, like choosing who you reach out to and to mobilize, get out the vote operations. That's what political parties do. And it's particularly dangerous because we're talking about federal agencies that hand out benefits. And so if people are told, hey, we could really use you voting, Mr. Person who's getting this federal benefit, you can see why that would be viewed as improper and unethical compulsion regarding voting, which is something that is very dangerous and which we have previously had strict laws against.
So tell me what's happening with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid, with their voter turnout, the Department of Labor, what are they doing? Department of Education.
Right. So each of them are choosing to respond to this executive order in different ways. And we are getting these indications that they're complying with this executive order, even if they're refusing to say what exactly they're doing. But you're seeing these public-facing things where they'll say that they're turning their health centers into vote vote places, where they're focusing their efforts that should be focused on job training, during a labor crisis, on get out the vote operations at Department of Education centers. Or the Federal Work Study Program, which is part of the Department of Education, had previously said, of course you can't use federal work study monies to engage in electioneering or election activity. And now they're saying you can use these monies to help run get out the vote operations. And I just think it's important to remember the context here, too, is that we just had this election in 2020 where we had Mark Zuckerberg finance the widespread takeover of government election offices with partisan, left-leaning activists, and they ran get out the vote operations in the blue areas of swing states. So the context here is really troubling, too, because we just saw in 2020 how this type of operation can have severely partisan repercussions, and why people should be on guard if they want to trust their elections and if they want to have confidence in their elections.
Molly, what do we do? We have no press that will do it. The congressman not getting responded to. The Justice Department is absolutely corrupt. What do we do?
So I do think that raising an outcry over the refusal to find out information is key. And there are lawsuits that are ongoing. 2 groups have sued to get the information. These agencies are clearly in violation of federal law. And so hopefully we would have enough pressure that those lawsuits can be responded to as soon as possible so that the public can know what's going on. And people should not despair. I mean, fighting over election administration is something that has been going on in this country for centuries. And despair is not an appropriate response because, you had even a few decades ago, the Democrat Party had disenfranchised like an entire race of people in the South. And people didn't despair. They just fought to make sure that the voting system was fair. And so I think the most important thing people can do is get involved at the local level. Find out what's going on in how elections are administered in your state and make sure that they're being done properly and that there are no shenanigans going on. And you're not going to be able to know that unless you're deeply involved in the process. So start now. We have widespread mail-in balloting and, an election season so that it's not just election day, which is frankly when Republicans go vote. It's those 2 months prior or even many, years prior where they're setting up the system by which everyone else is voting or by which the system is so insecure that it can be exploited. And you really have to just find out what the rules are in your area, find out what's going on and get involved, do election observation, research, and everybody should do that if they care about the republic. Because if we don't have elections we can trust, you don't really have a country. But it's not the end of the world. It just requires people to get involved and pay attention.
So, Molly, it's really interesting to me because I look at the things that they do and I'm like, who has time for this? But you have time if you think that you should be in charge of everything and everybody. That is their full-time job, to figure out ways to control everything. The conservatives, we have just been, asleep at the switch. We're like, no, everybody thinks like this. No, they don't. No, they don't. There's probably 15% of very, very active Americans that are intent on taking the republic and destroying it. We just have to wake up and start realizing it's really our fault that this is happening because we've just been expecting somebody else to take care of it for us.
So I wrote a book on the 2020 election called Rigged: How the Media, Big Tech, and Democrats Seized Our Election. And I go through all sorts of things, including this Mark Zuckerberg operation. That was a $450 million operation. It was more than anyone had ever conceived of spending on something to take over the government administration of elections. But that is what I worry about. The federal government, they spend $450 million in a blink of an eye. They have so much money to throw at this that it is really worrisome, and the Constitution does not authorize it. Congress has not authorized it, and yet they're still doing it. But you're absolutely right that a lot of people have just been asleep and not thinking about election integrity for decades. But in my book, I actually tell the story about how there was this court order that kept Republicans from doing any election day oversight for nearly 40 years. I couldn't believe it when I first learned about it, but in the early 70s, a judge in New Jersey put them under a consent decree where they couldn't get involved in any litigation, election day litigation. And for nearly 40 years, they were kept under this. It took the judge dying and being replaced by an Obama-appointed judge who said, this is ridiculous, like, let the Republicans out.
Wow.
And it was so sensitive that during the 2016 election, Sean Spicer was on the wrong floor of Trump Tower, and they almost kept him under the consent decree for another few years. Like, because he was supposed to be on floor 4 instead of floor 5, and that's how sensitive it was. And it kept Republicans from really focusing on this for a very long time. But they're kind of liberated now, and so they are doing much more to do election day oversight, and there are many more resources in play now.
Real quick, any thoughts on the Supreme Court and what's coming here again today in just a few minutes?
Well, I think but there are so many important decisions, and yesterday's decision was a huge victory for the Constitution, and it really does speak to the importance of having solid, originalist judges or justices on the court. Everyone's, of course, anxious for the Dobbs decision, the abortion-related decision, and a lot of people thought it should have been out earlier because of these death threats that the justices are facing. So hopefully it will, it'll come out this week or next week, but it's been, I think, an overall pretty good term for people who care about the Constitution.
Yeah, I think it's been very good. Molly, great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
You bet. Molly Hemingway.
If you enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe to our channel so you'll be sure to see similar videos from Blaze TV with the added bonus of signaling YouTube that your voice and opinion still matters. And if you're looking for more great conservative content, check out one of the 2 videos suggested here.